Have you ever spent hours trying to learn how to do an eye splice, only to fall at the last step when you try to bury the cover and the core up inside the standing end of the rope? If you have, watch on for the simplest surefire method to help you complete your first ever eye splice. Before we jump into today's video, we'll take a look at the tools of the trade to complete the Nordic eye splice. We're going to need your D-splicer, some standard fids, a pair of scissors, some Sharpie pen, some whipping twine and tape, and a needle. And as always, if you're looking to give it a go yourself, you can always pick up the tools of the trade in the product links in the description below. Step number 1, you want to create a locking knot around about 2 to 3 meters from the working end of the rope where you're going to put your splice. Once that's in place, move on to step 2, where you want to measure around about a fid length from the end of the rope. And this is where you're going to pull the core out of the cover. To do this, you'll need a smaller fid. You want to work the strands open, slowly pulling the core out, making sure that you bring it out in one whole piece rather than pulling out individual strands, which will make harder later on in the splice. You then want to lay it flat and pull around about an inch or two of the core out from the cover before taping the end to stop it from fraying and keep the core integrity in place for the next part of the slice. Part 3, you want to snip the cover off just past where you pulled the core out, making sure that you don't cut any of the core. You then, at this stage, want to move on to the next step where you get your needle and whipping twine, and you want to just join the cover and the core together to stop them slipping as we complete the splice. This helps keep everything in place as we do the final bettering. Step number 5, you need to put a bite in the rope where you want to create your eye. Then you want to mark where you want the size of the eye, ensuring that you have around about 1.5 to 2 inches of both the cover and the core extending down past that point. That will ensure that you get the berry and the full strength of the rope down past the eye of the splice when you're finished. You then repeat the step of pulling the cover out of the core, but this time you're going to pull the length of the core out from the standing end of the rope back to where the knot was. You then want to lay out the splice and just normalize from the bit of tape where the cover goes over the core, just ensuring that there's no bunches in the rope. You then want to take your D-splicer, starting at the point where the core comes out at the working end, and you want to weave in and out of the core, making sure that you start at a distance that it's at least as long as the tail that's on the working end of the line. So in and out, and then pull the D-splicer through, pop your line in, and then you want to work the working end of the splice and rope all the way back through the weaves that you put into the core in the loop. Pop the rope out of your D-splicer, and then it's just a matter of normalizing the rope, pulling out a little bit more. At this point, if you need to take the knot out to get a little bit more that's a couple of meters up the rope, it's not a problem. We've just got one last little bit that we can pop through with our hands. You could use the D-splicer again if you couldn't get it through. And at that point, you want to take off the bit of tape and just taper a 45-degree angle on the working end just to help with the taper. So then if we, once again, lay out the splice, you'll see that we just normalize the cover over the core, just pulling more through as you need it, just to make a nice, smooth, continuous loop with the cover over the core. Step number 10 is the final one of the splice, where we're going to bury everything inside the standing end. Just before we do this, and once again because of the looseness of the cover, we're just going to tape the cover and the core together where the initial weave started in the previous step, and then again where the tapered tail comes out of the core. If the core had a tighter weave, you may not need this step. There's no issue with having the tape buried up within the standing end of the line. At this point, this is where many of the people with the splicing would get to this point and won't be able to complete the bury. We've sped this up at 2 times the speed, but this is the actual footage of us doing this by hand with no gloves on. You can see starting up near the knot and then just sliding the rope forward. The bury is easily happening. When it gets a little bit tighter, you can just work the rope around and around, and then you can see that it is actually burying. If you do get stuck, it's just a matter of taking a small fid and just widening out the strands of the cover at the Y of the splice just a little bit, and then giving it one last slide of the cover over the core, working back from the knot, and hey presto, in she goes. This version of the Norson Splice has to be the easiest eye splice that I've ever completed, particularly that tricky last step. If you wanted to finish the splice off a little bit further, you could put the eye over a fixed object or clip it onto something and then put a bit more tension on it, and that will just normalize all of the inner workings that are now slid up past the Y, and settle it down before you go into use. But there you have it, the Norson's Eye Splice in double braided rope. If you can't complete the bury of the splice by hand, go back to the start of the video where we took the standing end of the line and tied it to a fixed object, and then got a metal pick, putting it in the eye and swinging on it while pulling the rope down. Giving a few quick tugs should get the bury if you can't do it the way we did by hand. Thanks for sticking around all the way to the end. Hopefully you would agree that the Norson's Eye Splice has to be the simplest way to eye splice in double braided rope.